You're listening to The West Coast Truth with your host, Russell Scott.
On tonight's program, writer, director, and broadcaster, Kerry Cassidy.
Kerry Cassidy, welcome to the West Coast Truth.
Hi there, how are you?
I'm the one asking the questions, Kerry. For the audience who doesn't know, who is Kerry Cassidy?
I head up Project Camelot, and Project Camelot is a website mainly geared to whistleblowers from above top secret clearances, and we also interview researchers and experiencers and anyone who is revealing the real truth behind the matrix.
Are you able to tell more about yourself? How you got into it? How do you start Project Camelot? Because you were initially in the film industry.
That's absolutely right. I was a frustrated filmmaker. I was putting together sci-fi projects, dealing with subjects very similar to what I ended up doing in investigative journalism on, and filmmaking in Project Camelot. So I was. There's a little kid outside.
It's
the
not
door.
One of those black-eyed children, is it?
No. He's entranced. But anyway, I don't know. I was a frustrated filmmaker. I reached a glass ceiling in Hollywood, and I decided to go out and start making my own UFO documentary. And so, having reached that glass ceiling, I had been getting the rights to various projects, and one of them was Wingmakers. And Wingmakers is kind of a cult website with multimedia. It has a story about a scientist with an above top secret clearance, and it's a fascinating saga that involves the Wingmakers, a group of beings that are said to be our progenitors, or I'm not sure I would say
progenitors.
Progenitors. And so I was shopping that around Hollywood I actually got it to people like Steven Spielberg's Kathleen Kennedy, and I got it to Ridley Scott's story person, and also James Cameron's story person. And I, even though it was a great project, they turned me down because I didn't have a track record. And that's kind of like a glass ceiling in Hollywood. You know, you need a track record to get anything done, but in order to get a track record, it's like that catch-22 they get you into. So, and I wasn't very much of an ass kisser, I have to say, in working my way up in Hollywood. So I didn't do what you're supposed to do. I didn't get into the old boys network in the right way, and I didn't kiss enough ass. So, what happened at that point is I picked up a consumer-grade camcorder, and I just went out and started interviewing the speakers at UFO conferences, just putting a camera in front of their face and saying, "Have you seen a UFO?" Because I figured no one was asking them that question. And I got the most amazing interviews out of it, and I just found that I was really good at it, at least from the response. I just, I got people talking, and we had a good time, and it came across on film. So at that point, Bill Ryan was one of my interviewees. He was representing the Serpo project, and I decided to interview him because we were both part of a news group for a guy named Victor Martinez, who had a news group that a lot of intelligence agents, UFO sort of knots, whatever you want to call them, and journalists were part of. And Bill was on there. He had volunteered to make the website for, which is, I don't know if you know about Serpo. Do you know about it?
No.
Okay, serpo.org. I think I don't know if it's called Project Serpo, serpo.org as far as the URL now, but it's on the net. It was supposedly an alien human exchange program that took place in the 1960s. And it's very much, if you saw Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when Richard Dreyfuss goes to get on the UFO, I was going to say the vehicle.
It is a vehicle. Yeah.
I know, but it cracks me up because I'm so used to this sector now that I just take UFOs like people take cars. I don't.
Well, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. No, it just comes natural. So anyway, the thing is that was Serpo. That was more or less kind of a seeding of into the populace from Spielberg, as a matter of fact, who was given some inside information about Serpo and about things like that. And so Bill became one of my interviewees. I interviewed him at the UFO Congress that year, and that was in 2006. And I actually didn't even want to interview him because he was a webmaster for all intents and purposes. But he had he did great on the interview. He was very intelligent. He handled my questions well, and I gave him kind of a hard time because, like I said, I wasn't really impressed. He was the only spokesperson in the public for the Serpo disclosures that were coming through in these communiques on this news group that was supposedly from someone called Anonymous, but was actually releases from the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. So there was a lot of disinfo in Serpo. There is a lot of disinfo in Serpo, but there are some seeds of truth that we found out. And ultimately, Bill Ryan and I hit it off. He invited me to come to Tintagel and Stonehenge in England. And I was on my way to do a tour with Jordan Maxwell and William Henry of Atlantis in Egypt at that time, because I had a small inheritance that my mother had passed away. And then I took a right turn or left turn, whatever you call that. And then on my way back, stopped over in England. Bill and I basically created the idea for Project Camelot in a span of like an hour in Tintagel, one of the former homes of King Arthur. And that's where we got the name Project Camelot. And I had written a script because I was writing screenplays back in those days and trying to shop them around Hollywood as well, called Project Moondust. And I named it after a black project that I'd heard of. And so I thought, let's name couldn't call it Camelot because there were a zillion Camelot URLs out there. So I said, let's call it Project Camelot. That way we have the black project, because black projects always call themselves Project this, Project that. And so that was the beginnings of Project Camelot.
Well, is this reality or fantasy-based programming?
What do you mean?
Project Camelot.
It's totally reality. I'm an investigative journalist. So do you really not know whether it's reality-based? I am an investigative journalist. Our witnesses are, like I said, they have above top secret clearances, and the evidence is there. It's all over Project Camelot. We've got over 300 hours of audio and video footage. We ended up to be sort of a grassroots movement. We really sort of hit the zeitgeist back in 2006, and we just started going out there in an amazing way, and people even, now I was recently recognized in the wilds of Ireland when we were just hiking through some fields by some guy who had a farm there. I mean, it's very bizarre, what happened with Camelot. We were very, very lucky. It was as if we were guided, especially in the early days. About, let's see, I've been in operation for about little under 7 years. For the first 4 years, things were really amazing and magical. And then things started to fall apart, and we started to go in different directions. And I ended up taking over Camelot for the past 2 years. And Bill Ryan went on to take over Project Avalon and pursue some things of his own interest. Both of us still doing interviews and writing blogs and so on and so forth. But but mainly Bill kind of went off the radar, and I sort of stayed on the radar, and I'm sort of in the front lines to this day.
With all the interviews that you've done and all the testimony that you've collected, do you find there are more conflicting testimonies, or are you seeing a convergence, a linear thread of truth?
Well, there's no doubt about it that we have a convergence. And what's fascinating with Camelot is that we went on a sort of a journey, and people end up, if they watch our videos, especially if you watch them sort of in order in terms of timing, you end up going down the rabbit hole along with us. And both of us were extremely well schooled in most things, sort of beneath the radar of the Matrix anyway. In other words, we both came from alternative backgrounds. And part of the reason we hit it off so well initially was because we both saw the world in a similar way, and we both wanted to get the truth out. That was our objective with Camelot. We decided, what the hell? I was a filmmaker, he was a writer and a webmaster, and we just put our skill sets together and thought, we'd like to change the world. That was basically the premise, and we never looked back. We didn't hesitate. We just put the website up. We had no idea if anyone would be interested whatsoever. We just decided to do it, and we had one witness, was Mr. X, and we interviewed him as our first witness. He had approached Bill as the webmaster of Serpo, writing to him saying that he had been had a clearance. He had never told anyone what he did 30 years ago, that he wanted to tell someone, and basically he kind of chosen Bill because he became a fan of some of the Serpo material. And so Bill and I went down, and we got to know him, we got to know his family, and that became sort of the way we operated. We got to know our witnesses really well. They almost without exception became our friends. Some fascinating trajectories have happened as a result of that. Some of them turned against us in later years. Some of the psychology of whistleblowers plays into that dynamic. So there is a psychology of whistleblowers that is, like I say, very fascinating and very, very unique to the situation we're in, because you must understand what it's like to be part of the secret space program. And I just wrote a very long article on my blog. It's actually more of a report called Black Projects Follow the Money, and I highly recommend it to your listeners. It's actually about 17 or 19 pages long, but it's all on my blog, has a number of links, and we're going to be putting in more links so people can sort of educate themselves about the Black Projects. But I think it's unusual because it's one of the first times anyone in this sector has written about the entire secret space program and all the different projects that they're involved in. The ones that we have become aware of. That doesn't mean that it includes everything, because obviously something secret is very hard to uncover. But I have had enough whistleblowers and conversations with sources, even behind the scenes, where I've gotten an incredible amount of information. And so I just compiled it into this document. But I know I'm kind of rambling here, but the psychology of whistleblowers works into why some whistleblowers will tell you one thing one day, and then, a week later, a month later, or 2 years later, come back to you and want to take it all back. They get threatened. Their families get threatened. People close to them get threatened, or they get what I call quietly coerced. And they want to, they basically kind of, you might say, flip from hot to cold. So it's really interesting dichotomy, and you must, in a sense, what we became in Project Camelot were people that really knew how to handle whistleblowers, that very unique personality. And I have to say that I can now read a witness very well, and I know how to question them in a certain way to get the truth. To break through. Another part of it has to do with layers of programming. Everyone has been programmed who lives in the Matrix, but whistleblowers and people that work for the military especially when you get above top secret, but even in the traditional military, have layers of programming upon layers. And it's detecting these layers. It's realizing when you're being lied to, or when somebody is telling you a truth that they believe, but is actually an implanted truth. And so knowing that as an interviewer is vital. And there are a lot of interviewers out there that simply don't have those chops. And then they interview somebody who has maybe been a former person in above top secret, and they don't know how to ask the questions to get the real answers. So consequently, I think that Camelot has been very, very popular out there, and I continue to ask the hard questions and go down those roads.
Kerry, we'll take our first break, so we'll be back in 2 minutes with today's guest, Kerry Cassidy.
There is a jaguar outside my door, stretched out and purring, waiting for more, strange shade of stone.
Can I say something about Man-Made Chronicles? I was so pleased you let me read it in, draft form, I guess it was. And boy, I'm excited about it. So everyone should order that too.
I read your manuscript, which I really, really enjoyed. And what I liked about your manuscript was I got a feeling from it that these kinds of beings and these kinds of stories are actually real things. And that what we're getting down here in our human records is we're actually getting the traces of the actual stories of those beings. I loved the idea of how you brought forth the possibility that the myths that we have and the stories that we have and the religious records that we have are actually their records and their stories.
We're back with Kerry Cassidy. Just for clarification, this Mr. X, is that the same as Colonel X?
No, it isn't.
From UFO Highway?
No, and there's more than one Colonel X out there as well. No, that's not the same person. Mr. X was a young man, relatively young man when we met him, and sadly has passed away. Actually, we believe that he was taken out because he was about to go public. Actually, he wanted to go on coast to coast. He had started to feel very comfortable with getting his truth out there after he went on Camelot, and had been out in the sector for several years. And then what happened is what he was a UFO archivist. He for the military, and he worked for a very well-known. Let me see. I can actually say it. I'm so used to protecting my witnesses that I do so.
It's our little secret, Kerry. It's okay.
No, yeah, right. Well, I believe he worked for Rockwell, and in what they did was he was a graphic artist and more for the military, and as I say, the defense industry actually. And what happened was they asked for volunteers because they had a lot of material they wanted archived, and he volunteered for the job. He got extra pay, and he actually ended up doing the job for 6 months, and this was back in the 80s. And he had to sign an above top secret security clearance, and he had a guard at the door, and he worked in a vault, and he went through tapes, and this was back in the days when they had those reel-to-reel type tapes, I guess, and those big fat tapes and so on. And he also cataloged photographs and all kinds of memorabilia and documentation of the military's interaction with various ET races, specifically what are called the large oranges, or tall oranges, the grays, and I believe possibly the Nordics as well. And so that's who Mr. X was. But he did die suddenly. I think it's been 2 years ago now, around Christmas time, and he had done an audio interview with us. Like I say, we figure he was taken out. The reason was because he was quite a young man. I think he was in his 40s, and he and his wife just had a new baby. He was absolutely ecstatic about his new baby, and physically he appeared to be in fine health, and he went Christmas shopping, and then in the middle of the night, he complained to his wife that he was feeling very strangely. She took him to the hospital about 3 a.m. By 12 noon, he was dead. And we don't know, they're saying, I think they said maybe it was a heart attack or something of that nature, but indications, this is the kind of way they take people out. Just prior to that, we had spoken at the Crash Retrieval Conference in Nevada, and as part of our presentation, he had done a quick interview with us over audio in which he came out using his own voice, and that was about 3 weeks prior to when he passed away. So you could say it was coincidence, but in Camelot, coincidences don't ever happen, just synchronicities and intentional things.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Have you heard that one?
Sure. Yep. I say we definitely qualify with extraordinary evidence. In our case, the evidence.
How do you do the due diligence?
It's witness testimony, which is what we have. What happens is a lot of times, and it's very fascinating, this whole sort of sector that we got into, because the people that you would expect that would come towards you or approach you and supposedly be very verbose or whatever and say, I know this, I know that, et cetera, end up to be the last people that, are trustworthy. The people who normally became our witnesses were people that wrote to us very covertly, very carefully. They vetted us in the initial stages. They were usually would meet us in public places where they would feel comfortable and set up the situation. It is very interesting how the whole trajectory happens. For example, with Henry Deacon, who later came out and went on stage with Bob Dean and said he'd been on Mars, and he is a scientist. And worked at Lawrence Livermore is one of the places he worked, and several other places. He was somewhat unusual because he was cross-disciplinary in certain ways, and I still have to be careful in how I classify what he did. But at any rate, when we first met with him, after a few phone calls and conversations, and he was put in touch with us through a third party initially. And as he became to more and more to trust us, then he was willing to meet with us in person. Then we went to a public place. He had some kind of device he set up on the table, which was purposely to drown out any surveillance technology that might be able to hear what we were saying. It was a very large, as I recall, pizza place. And both Bill and I were kind of like blown away by the situation, and we weren't able to take notes. We weren't able to record him or put him on camera or any of that stuff. He was extremely paranoid, and rightly so, as it happens. And this was the introduction to Henry Deacon, and we also ended up going to his place of work, just outside it. You can't go inside these places, but we did meet some people that he'd worked with, and spent many nights, like into 3 and 4 in the morning, talking about his background and what he'd been involved in. So, and then we put out basically transcripts of our conversations that we would, that we compile, and then he would approve, and we would put out there. It was interesting also in his case is that a couple of years later, the one thing he wanted to remove from the transcript was very telling, in my opinion. And he came to us I think it was almost 2 years later, and said he wanted us to take out any references to Solar Warden. And Solar Warden is a fascinating, interstellar, program that is above top secret. And whether it's still called that to this day, I don't know. But we had been given information by other people besides Henry Deacon on that program. So it was interesting that he wanted to remove his reference to it. As it happened, he had been threatened more than once. Although if you ask him today if he'd been threatened, he probably would tell you no. That's another weird thing that goes on with whistleblowers. They'll tell you one thing, and then especially about threats, they tend to either the person threatening them tells them that they can't reveal that they've been threatened, as you can appreciate. So that's like a threat within a threat. Or they decide that they don't want people to know they've been threatened. And it's just this weird psychology going on. And so that's kind of the trajectory in that sense. But what happens is a lot of the information that we got from whistleblowers ended up to be corroborated by other witnesses. And the way we would sort of vet that is the same way that an intelligence agency works, which means you get 3 testimonies from 3 completely different people who do not know each other and do not know about each other's testimony. And that is, when you get that, that's like a real sort of red flag that you can, pretty much start following that trail and end up maybe getting even more corroborating evidence. But if, that's how it works. And so that's kind of how we work. I also I am an intuitive. I have a high degree of intuitive and psychic ability that served us very well in Camelot, and has been proven right time and time again, such that I've become, I tend to trust my instincts very much now.
It's election day today, Kerry. Do you have a prediction on the winner?
I don't do predictions. I'm an intuitive, but, I sort of fly by the seat of my pants, so to speak. I'm what you might call a troubleshooter. But at the same time, I as far as predictions, I don't like sort of impinging on other people's realities. So I don't like to sort of, I guess, have too much influence in that regard. I can share, intuitive takes, or dreams that come to me. I get a lot of dream visions. And recently I wrote about on my blog, I had a very real, it was more like a real encounter than even a dream vision in this case, where I spent the night talking to Obama. And I was there in the White House with him and his family, and they were packing to leave. And I don't believe that he is going to lose this election. I think that now I could be wrong, of course, even about my interpretation of my own sort of dream vision, whatever you want to call it. But what I was getting in that was he felt something like failure. He felt that he had not lived up to his sort of mission. And he also felt that his hands were tied by the sort of powers that be, if you want to call them that. The Bush cabal would be a good way to put it. And basically was stepping down and leaving the White House. And what I got from the dream was that I actually think he's going to win this election, but that he is going to then step down. How that's going to happen, I don't know. Now,
Giuliani called on him to step down just the other day.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but there was a supposed coup, in the White House recently, in which was reported by Gordon Duff, he's the senior editor of Veterans Today, who writes for Veterans Today and also for Press TV. And he wrote an article about a coup that was discovered that supposedly was involved an admiral and several individuals in the military, and that they were preparing for Obama to win the election and then to go and basically get him to step down, which is interesting. And they were discovered supposedly by Obama, and then that admiral was being fired, and this was in the news recently. I don't think it made the major news, to be honest, and I think to some degree there may have been some disinfo in there. They called it a 7 days in May type of scenario. Now, I believe that we do have that going on. I believe there are probably more than one faction of the military making plans, let's put it that way. However, how this was characterized, I think, was not probably the real story. I don't know. Just this is my intuitive take more than anything else, but I did write a commentary about it on my blog for people that are interested. And I must say that right now, because we don't have a lot of money, I do not fly around the world like we used to do as much and interview people. A lot more of what I do now is on my radio shows, which are on Wednesday and Friday on American Freedom Radio and Revolution Radio from 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific time, where I interview people on my radio show. And also I do live events using Skype and either live stream or some other streaming. And then we put those out. Actually, we put those up for sale because it's kind of like a small conference where I end up paying the speakers and trying to raise money for Camelot. Initially, when Camelot started, we had first of all, my mother had passed away, so I had a small inheritance that I basically devoted to Camelot, and that enabled us to go, to travel and do interviews. Although we lived very cheaply, so I have to say we did it like on a shoestring. And then we ran out of money about 2 years in, and we ended up starting to ask people for donations. People responded really incredibly to us, and we were able to survive and continue to do the work. Although the past couple of years, because of the economy, donations have really gone down, and I've started to do these live events to try to make money. I also have a conference called the Awake and Aware Conference. And I did one in 2009 and in 2011, and I'm about to do another one. Actually, it looks like 2013 we might even do two. We've got one in the works that's going to happen in Joshua Tree in February, it appears, and we've also got another one in April in San Francisco. And both people are donating their venues, so it's going to be kind of fun and exciting to do that. In two different places, but it's going to be very cool.
Kerry Cassidy, let's take another break. We're halfway through it. We'll be back in 2 minutes with today's guest, Kerry Cassidy.
Welcome to Earth Calling, SOS with your host, Earth Doctor, Reese Halter.
Coming soon, an avalanche in our ice cream. The Swiss food conglomerate Nestle is using techniques developed to study avalanche ice dynamics and learn lessons that will help improve Haagen-Dazs. Over time, ice cream stored in a home freezer develops texture-ruining ice crystals. The problem begins when you take the carton out of the freezer to get a few scoops of ice cream. By exposing the ice cream to room temperature, even for a minute or two before putting the carton back into the freezer, the ice cream begins to melt. When ice cream refreezes, its crystals get bigger. The Nestle scientists are working to identify the main mechanism driving the growth of ice crystals within ice cream. The goal is to find ways to slow down the ice crystals and make tastier ice cream that lasts longer. Imagine what else avalanches can tell us. I'm Earth Dr. Reese Halter, and I hear Earth calling SOS. Respond and protect our planet.
How can we dance when our earth is turning? How do we sleep while our bed?
We're back with today's guest, Kerry Cassidy, also known as Kerry Lynn Cassidy. Which one do you prefer, Kerry?
Well, actually, I prefer Kerry Lynn Cassidy, but I'm good with Kerry, however you want to. I don't even care if some people call me. I don't want to say what some people call me. I have a real reputation out there, so.
Any relation to David Cassidy, that whole group?
Nope, none. Cassidy is actually my stage name. It's not my real last name. That'll start a few conspiracies, won't it?
That is juicy. Yes. I'm hearing things. I hear you mention The Matrix, and I've heard you mention the Stepford wife reality.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, yeah, I haven't actually said that in quite a while. You must have been following my trajectory for a while or something.
I do my homework.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Well, I mean, I mean, in many ways, the way people live is very Stepford wife type of thing. In other words, that's a great movie, by the way, and the way those Stepford wives were depicted, I mean, that's mind control par excellence. And in some ways, take religious fundamentalism, take any kind of sort of heavily invested educational program, the way people conduct their lives in the Matrix here, where we, the way we live, the way they live, they act like they're programmed mannequins, and so that's what the Stepford wife reality is. It could be, I don't know, Desperate Housewives or whatever it's called, even though they're kind of fun because they're so whacked out. But anyway, so what I was going to tell you was that this report that I wrote on my blog called Black Projects Follow the Money, I just want to keep coming back to that because it's the most recent thing that I was involved in doing. And one of the things about that is that it was a report done at the request of the White Hats, who were going to be releasing what is called number 48, which they have 47 reports on their website, and they are different than Camelot. They are a group of people that are military, ex-military, intelligence agents, and so on, who've kind of gotten together, and a very core group who are forensic financial investigators. They follow the money, and they have been writing reports for the last 2 years and publishing them on what's called a website called the Dark Cabal blogspot.com. And so what is interesting is I got to know a couple of their principal members, and they told me about the release of number 48. I know some of the background of their investigations with regard to an organization called Pure Heart Investments. And this is sort of a cover organization for where the money goes, and it's funneled through and involves trading programs and so on. and is very much part of orchestrated by the Bush cabal, and specifically, from what I understand, Bush Sr. At any rate, they were about set to release that report and then did an about face. However, not before one of them had come on my radio show, T-Man, and announced that they were going to release the report and so on. And then I had been sort of enlisted to do the background to the report for people who were not familiar with the whole Black Project scenario. In other words, in certain ways, it was not written for the Camelot audience who already are familiar with Black projects, etc. It was more for the person who was maybe following the White Hats, had a background in investigating finance and all kinds of corruption in that way, but never kind of went into the secret space program or Black projects. To their credit, they've written several reports prior to this that did reference Black projects, money being funneled into the secret space program, etc. So the longer they were in operation, the more they went down the rabbit hole themselves and started to get more evidence of where the financial corruption is really going. In other words, you just don't have just banksters ripping, people off and so on and so forth in things like the mortgage scandals, LIBOR, etc. But you've got actually orchestrated not only drug and prostitution, etc. kind of money, but you've got money that has been sort of raised through what are called trading programs. That if you sort of contact the FBI right now and tell them about trading programs, they'll say they don't exist. There is such a cover-up even about that. But the White Hats were extremely courageous in breaking open some of those stories and referencing specific players and following the money and putting the documentation and the evidence on their website. Now, this is something that Camelot does not do. We don't have documentation normally, and we don't really follow the money. That's not our area of expertise. We, again, specialize in witness testimony. So I wrote this report to back up their sort of forensic investigations into the whole money trail. And what has happened since then is that they've kind of done an about face and have not released number 48 because, well, I know for a fact that they were threatened a while, during the time when they were planning to release it. And the other thing is that I think that they were, as I call it, quietly coerced. In other words, either they were made an offer they couldn't refuse, or they were told to stand down for a certain period of time, or they were told to, basically stand down, period. Otherwise, whatever dire consequences would ensue. And at this point, I don't have verification of that. I simply know that they were, I was told they were threatened, but they were going to go ahead regardless of those threats. At least last time I talked to them, and when I was writing my report for them, to back up their report. But then 2 weeks went by. They didn't release their report. Whatever transpired has transpired, and so I decided that I would go ahead and release my portion. So that's kind of that little drama, and my report has now gone viral. It's been on Rumor Mill News, and I can't even imagine all the different places it's going to end up. But there's a lot of information in there.
You're writing reports. You have 300 hours of testimony. Have you become an expert?
To some degree, it's hard to call oneself an expert in above top secret when I don't have that clearance and I myself haven't worked in it. But I can certainly say that my exposure to witnesses with above top secret clearances, and we're talking way above top secret, and in many cases above presidential levels, we're talking, I don't know. Yes, to some degree, I would call myself a kind of an expert, but you might call me an expert in witness testimony.
Well, you've been down many rabbit holes, so let's go down a few here. What do you know about the DARPA time travel program?
Okay, well, I mean, that's interesting that you're classifying it already as DARPA.
Would you like me to re-ask the question?
No, I mean, it's fine. I'm sure that, there is an aspect of DARPA that's involved in time travel. I can say that time travel is an integral part of any sort of UFO off-world interaction that we're having. And this gets very involved, but suffice to say that if you go off planet, you are sort of involved in time travel, because in order to get from point A to point B without sort of dying and taking more years than you even have in your life, you have to fold space or do something, which is in essence time travel. And this is what UFOs are doing all the time. I believe that our human bodies are basically time travel machines for all intents and purposes. In other words, we are time travelers. And I think that will become more and more evident to people the more they become familiar with the different aspects of who we really are and what we are capable of. But to answer your question in a more pragmatic way, I can say that, for example, Los Alamos has a time travel area of discipline that they investigate and are part of. They have a jump gate, I'm sure, in underground in below Los Alamos, and they have other jump gates and other, Dimona in Israel is a time travel, has a jump gate. Now, some of this information I get from whistleblowers, and some of it also is corroborated by my own intuitive knowledge that I get information coming to me. And I do get that. And it is fascinating. Sometimes I get it before I interview a witness and end up getting corroboration after I interview the witness from the witness themselves, or I simply get information, that comes on its own. But our above top secret, secret space program is very involved in time travel. Henry Deacon, when he took a jump room to Mars, and we have a video called, we did a conversation with David Wilcock called Jump Room to Mars, in which David talked about his witness, who had also been familiar with time travel. And it all starts, I guess, if you want to go back to the Nazis and the Nazi Bell in Germany, and then the Project Paperclip, how they came over as part of that project. The Nazis really didn't lose the war. They just joined the United States government. So the sort of whole area of time travel is fascinating, very, very important, very crucial to understanding the real matrices that we live in, and going down that road.
How does the government use the manipulation of time to rule the masses?
Well, that's a very sophisticated question. I can say that they do shift timelines, and they are in the process of shifting timelines, in my view. And one of the ways is probably by using the fourth dimension. There's a lot of dealing, from what I understand, in our U.S. military with the fourth dimension. And there has been some testimony to the effect that the Earth at this time is being run from the fourth dimension by fourth dimensional beings, which are the Anunnaki. And therefore, when you look at the surface of Mars, you're not really seeing fourth dimensional Mars, you're seeing the 3D Mars. And so Mars looks like a barren planet, etc. But if you go, what Mars really is, or at least the surface that you're seeing, is a kind of a wormhole into the fourth dimension. And from there, they work on bases and so on that are working on a surface Mars that is much more conducive to human life, so to speak. So this is what I'm being told. I'm also told that there's a command and control center in Phobos, where where humans are working with with these, in essence, Anunnaki who never left the planet. And this gets back to the work of Zecharia Sitchin, the Sumerian tablets, etc. And some people will contest some of Zechariah's conclusions, but I have multiple whistleblower testimony to the effect that the Anunnaki are here. They are, as Bob Dean says, walking the halls of the Pentagon. In some cases, they are very tall. In some cases, they are more or less our size, and have human bodies now. Of course, many of us have Anunnaki genes as well, and so there's a whole side to that. The bloodline saga is a fascinating one. But in answer to your question about how they use time travel, they're using time travel to operate the secret space program and to be part of, in essence, a rogue civilization. What they're doing with humans is more of a mind control program that's not so much involved in time travel as it is involved in sort of using scalar weaponry, electromagnetics, holograms, etc., to deceive humanity and to keep humanity dumbed down as to what's really going on.
You say what Mars really looks like, the fourth dimension. We're living on Earth. Could we possibly be living in a lower, within a lower level, a lower plane?
Well, right now, we're said to be living in the third dimension, but in reality, we are in the Earth right now is transiting into the fourth dimension.
And when you say four, you mean four spatial dimensions. We all know that time is the fourth dimension, right?
Well,
or is this a different view?
It's kind of like that, except that I guess time space versus space time. And I'm not a scientist. All I know is the references that I get from witnesses reference a fourth dimensional Mars, that they are using jump gates here on Earth to go into the fourth dimension. Now, as I said, the Earth and this solar system is moving into a 4D. In other words, we've been 3D for a long time. We are moving into 4D. And eventually, there is a sort of ascension trajectory that civilizations go through. And 4D, the way it's described to me, is the area in which the Greys and various ET races, many of which are not going to go above 4D, exist and have sort of their domain. They are able. That's why they're in so-called. We're like now moving to upper 3D. That's where we're at. This is where the veil is thinning, and you're seeing. This is where you actually will have, visitors and so on. A lot of those visitors who walk through walls, etc., they're also walking from you might say, from the fourth dimension into the third. So it's a dimensional shift that's going on the planet to where this sort of veil is thinning, and those races have become more aware of us. They're interacting with us to a greater degree. And this is also where civilizations such as Earth, in its move from the third dimension to the fourth dimension, is dealing with group-to-group dynamics. And so we are moving out of sort of an individual sort of, where you go human relationships and you're dealing individual to individual. You're dealing now with racial politics, which involve groups. For example, the Greys, the Nordics, the humans, the this, the that. It's all part of joining the galactic community. And that's really where we're at right now. So when I say fourth dimensional Mars, we're talking about literally sort of a wormhole going into another dimension.
So what's happening there now with the Curiosity rover? Is this bread and circuses, or is this a legitimate fact-finding mission? Well,
when you're talking about NASA, you're talking about a cover organization. In a certain sense, a certain part of NASA is a bridge between the secret space program and the general public and mainstream reality. and they are misleading the public hugely. But there are scientists. I've actually worked for JPL as a contractor during the time before Camelot.
That's Jet Propulsion Laboratory?
That's correct. And so I know for a fact that there are scientists that really believe they are working on a secret space. I mean, not a secret, a regular space program, but and they're dedicating their lives to this. And actually, it's one of the great tragedies, in my view, that if you can understand that on a certain level, the ones that stay below top secret are the ones that are not being allowed in. In other words, they're either not making the grade because they're not considered to be the on the cutting edge. They don't have either the intelligence, the bloodline, or the talent to join the secret space program. They haven't been brought on board, or they're too rebellious to bring on board, and they may have what I call the rebel gene, which I have in plenty, that keeps them from being part of the program. But mostly they are simply not, they're the individuals that were not groomed from a young age, like Pete Peterson, one of our interviewees, because they watch the children. They follow a child's trajectory. And when they have a child who has the right bloodline and displays talent in science especially, they obviously follow their career and also make opportunities available to them. And eventually they entice them into what becomes the secret space program. They give them higher and higher clearances, and that's how it works.
The Anunnaki, those who walk the halls of the Pentagon, are these the reptilians that David Icke refers to?
Well, there may be some of those. We also have a lot of at this time androids, or you might duplicates, people that have been replaced by androids in the Pentagon and in various government.
Is Henry Kissinger one of these clones?
Well, I don't know. Deciding who's been
He's
cloned
been around
and
for
who
a
hasn't.
while. That's what I meant.
Yeah, there is evidence. Well, I don't know. I would say he's heavily reptilian, in his gene structure. I think, but a lot of these guys are. In other words, just because you have a lot of reptilian genes doesn't make you a reptile in the sort of classic sense of it. You have to understand that there are lots of reptilian races, or races also from Draco, that some of which are, they're highly intelligent. They probably have a hive mind. Not all of them are on the negative side or service to self. They've started to transition over, so you will get some positive reptilians out there. And what else can I tell you? You wanted to know if the ones walking the Pentagon were reptilians in the classic sense. No, not necessarily. When I say Anunnaki, I believe there's more than one, group of Anunnaki, but there are what I understand to be the reptilian strain of Anunnaki are a hybrid race of Anunnaki. They're not, the regular Anunnaki actually look humanoid. They are our progenitors to some degree, at least some of us. And they are extraordinarily tall. They're the Enki, you might say Enlil groups, but they also, some of them have been, in other words, genetically engineered themselves as a race. And in that case, you get a hybrid, which is as sort of reptilian-like. But the other ones look extremely humanoid. So it just depends which group. And I'm sure both are walking the halls of the Pentagon, if you want to really know the truth. And
I hear meowing. Is that the jaguar?
Yes, that's my Norwegian forest cat. If it's not the dog, it's the cat.
All right, well, let's take our final break with today's guest, Kerry Cassidy. We'll be back in 2 minutes after the turn.
It was late in December.
With nothing but his computer, an identity thief is able to use your information to open a bank account in order to make your money his money. You need LifeLock, the only identity theft protection company that now monitors bank accounts for takeover fraud. LifeLock, relentlessly protecting your identity. Call 1-800-LifeLock or go to lifelock.com today.
This is Jacques Fresco. Have you heard about the Venus Project? Check it out on thevenusproject.com. We cover many things with videos and books. One of the books is called The Best That Money Can't Buy. It'll give you an overview of the Venus Project and its architectural proposals to help solve the problems toward sustainability. Many of the problems that confront society today, war, poverty, hunger, are dealt with as you investigate the Venus Project. You'll find many different solutions.
Smart meter hacking. Have you heard about it? Probably not. Fact. Older analog meters required a BC Hydro employee to come out to your house and physically cut off your power. Fact. With smart meters, that task is now just a keystroke away. Fact. Computer hackers have had the ability to hack into the new smart meters like the ones BC Hydro is installing in your home since 2009. Funny how you hear very little about it. Get informed. Know the facts. This message brought to you by smartmeterblocker.com. smartmeterblocker.com.
We're back for our final segment with Kerry Cassidy. It's 2012 as we do this interview. In fact, it's election day. The show will be out Thanksgiving, hopefully. December 21st, 2012, the day it all ends. So you'll be able to enjoy the program for about a month. How do you see it all unfolding over the next 2 months here?
Oh, well, I'm taking a group to Egypt. So anyone listening to this, of course, by the time this comes out, maybe it'll be too late to join the trip, but you might.
Well, I'm asking specifically about the Mayan 2012, December 21st, Doomtard thing.
Well, what I'm saying is I am taking a group to Egypt during the 21st. In other words, we're going to be in the Great Pyramid on the 20th of, December 2012, and I am doing this on purpose. I planned this Egypt trip back when people were doomsdaying about, December 2012 and all the terrible things that were going to happen. And I figured, what the hell, I'm going to take a group, and go into what I consider to be the belly of the beast, because the Great Pyramid is an ascension machine, what I call an ascension machine, and it was taken over a long time ago by the dark side. So I'm going to take a group that to go and be there and to secure the light at this very important time of transition for planet Earth on the Giza Plateau, and so we will be there during that time. I kind of like to fly in the face of adversity, I guess you might say. It's just my personality. I'm not a run for shelter, retreat and all that kind of stuff.
How do you mean by ascension machine? Is this pyramid power in its ultimate form?
Yeah, well, it's a Stargate. It's a, for all intents and purposes, it's a Stargate. Dan Burish, in his interview with us, we did several interviews back in the day with Dan Burish, who has since become something of an enemy of ours. For some unknown reason. They just changed overnight the minute we went on stage with Henry Deacon, and he said he'd been on Mars as a scientist. They wrote us a letter, saying we are no longer going to deal with you and decided you're this and you're that and all this kind of weirdness. But at any rate, as far as the Great Pyramid being a Stargate, I mean, it is a Stargate, and the Stargates on planet Earth are highly contested by various ET races, especially dark side races that want to control them, and they're highly coveted, and that is part of what's going on. Is that during this time, that's 2012, it's actually a period of time from about 2012 to, from what I understand, about 2019, the stargates are opening on planet Earth, and there will be more opportunities for ascension. For ascension. And that means transitioning out of this reality, out of the matrix, and moving on, sort of back to Godhead, however you want to view it.
Is there an alien threat to humanity?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, it's very real. There are.
Is this the Nibiru Planet?
Well, Nibiru is. There are many. We've gotten so much information about Nibiru, and a lot of it is completely conflicting. So the trouble with Nibiru at this time is trying to figure out what's true from what's false, and it's become a real labyrinth. Purposely, I'm sure the powers that be want it that way. I can say that that we interviewed we interviewed Luca Scantamburlo in Italy, and our car was broken into at the Milan airport. They were searching for what they thought was evidence that Luca had given us. And if you go on Project Camelot and look up Luca Scantamburlo, you can listen to the interview and watch it. But we were initially wanting to interview Cristoforo Barbato, who was a journalist in Italy, who became famous as a person that was approached by a Jesuit priest who was on the run from SIV, the secret, the Italian secret service in essence, and it's also called, I believe, Secretum Omega. And at any rate, he supposedly gave Cristoforo Barbato a tape or a film of what was called Planet X, and that it was on its trajectory on the way here. The Vatican telescope is said to be aimed at it. It is an incoming body. Now, whether Planet X and Nibiru are the same thing, and whether this is a brown dwarf with a number of planets that circulate it moving on a trajectory that is part of our solar system in essence, on a very long elliptical orbit, maybe even perpendicular to the customary orbits of the planets. Again, this is the kind of thing that I got from my interview with Andy Lloyd, who wrote a book called Dark Star. Andy Lloyd, that is a fascinating interview, and Andy Lloyd's book is an excellent book. He researched the Nibiru concept for about 10 years from a scientific point of view. And it's just, he decided that it was a brown dwarf with planets circulating it. He also thinks that it's much farther out around the Oort cloud, apparently, and that it is not coming in as soon as some people think. Others think that it's a lot closer at this time. And then there's also conflicting testimony as to whether there's actually other incoming bodies that are not Nibiru, not the brown dwarf, but some other planetoids, one of which may have the so-called the return of the Anunnaki, which is the return of Horus, who will supposedly be returning to take control of Earth, and is in essence what the New World Order is all about, preparing for his return. There is some... And
this is this 1,000 years of enslavement.
Well, that's just...
The dog agrees.
or not, depending.
Yeah, I don't really know.
So anyway, there's just too much going on, and it's not possible at this time. At least I haven't not gotten the final 911 on what's happening in the near future with so-called incoming planetoid, and whether or not that is indeed Nibiru. So I've stopped trying to guess about whether it's which person is correct. It's just too much of a maze.
Is there an alien race on the moon with a base, some would say, on the dark side?
Oh, well, there's no doubt about it. We have bases on the moon and Mars.
Humans have bases.
Yes, but there are also definitely ET bases. We are dealing with ETs at these bases. The moon is very much, I think, in the hands of the dark, what you might call the dark ETs, especially the grays. I think there are a number of gray ET bases on the moon. And I've remote viewed the moon and so on, and seen these beings also in these robes that are very kind of creepy individual race of beings, and those aren't even the grays. I'm not even sure what they are. So yeah, we have bases. We also have, apparently we are terraforming moons off of Jupiter and Saturn at this time, and one moon, I'm told, of Uranus. So our secret space program is definitely gone interstellar. They have the technology to do so. They can go outside the solar system. They do monitor every craft that comes in and comes and goes from the solar system or within the solar system, visitors, etc. I have a tremendous amount of testimony in that regard.
We must really be in the dark ages as a common person, as the proletariat. How many years ahead of us is the government technologically?
Well, at least one of our witnesses, Jake Simpson, and I highly recommend his testimony, which he's never gone on film. He won't go before a camera, but I highly recommend his, the written transcript of, which is a composite of our conversations with him on Project Camelot, as for people to look at. It's excellent information, but it is said that they are like 10,000 years in advance of where we are at on sort of mainstream consensus reality here on planet Earth. But I will say that organizations such as Project Camelot are the bridge between the rogue secret space program and the mainstream. So we are actually the way by which that civilization and ours are able to eventually possibly communicate and even merge. If ever that's going to happen, it's going to be through organizations such as ours, getting the truth out and awakening people first, so that they can then take control in a conscious way of their own destiny. And that's really what's crucial here, is that humans, because they are being cut off from truth, are unable to chart their way through the sort of choppy waters of the future. They simply don't have enough information, true information, to give them what they need to make conscious decisions, intelligent decisions about which way humanity should turn. And so that's what Project Camelot is all about, is getting the truth out, and organizations and people such as yourself are obviously at work doing as well.
Well, your program goes farther down the rabbit hole than probably any other. Certainly farther than Coast to Coast AM. There's a huge business to this conspiracy truth stuff, many books, many seminars. However, your program has always maintained a more underground feel to it. It's information-based. Where can people find it? What's the website, Kerry?
Okay, well, it's projectcamelot.org or projectcamelot.tv. We'll take you there, or projectcamelotportal.com. All three URLs get you to the same place. And again, highly recommended to watch my blog. I actually post stuff there almost daily, and we've got all sorts of things going on. I've got 2 radio shows on Wednesday and Friday. I interview whistleblowers, and I do put testimony. Many people must understand that real whistleblowers often will never go before the camera, and that requires where my blog becomes really instrumental in getting the truth out as to what the latest testimony, the latest intel is. And so that's where you'll find it. We are taking a group to Egypt. I highly recommend that trip if you're interested. Let me see, what else can I say? I guess I am speaking at a conference, which is the Alchemy Conference, although I'll be doing this long distance because I'll be in another location, in an undisclosed location, beaming my testimony out over Skype and streaming to that conference. And let's see, at some point in 2013, we're going to be doing, like I said, 2 conferences, Awake and Aware conferences. One will be in Joshua Tree during February, I believe, and the other one will be in April in San Francisco, if all things go as planned.
Kerry Cassidy, it's been an honor. A lot of information, much left on the table. But I've really appreciated your time. Kerry Cassidy, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you.
And thank you for being on the West Coast Truth.